That's where I'm going in,
okay.
when am I going? The end of July. No, yeah, the end of July. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
We've been going down there, try to get down there for 3-4 days without the kids. It's kind of nice. My kids are 4 and 6, so anytime we
You
get a
need
little
break.
break from them, it's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm going down to see her in the end of July.
Okay.
Taking my daughter and my grandson with me.
Yeah, I'm trying. I just don't want them to think this is esoteric and that it's really community based.
So,
You're going away again? Going on vacation every other week? Marathon? What are the 150,000? Yeah, they can live in the ocean and they just put down there and then the month.
Well, they are going to do a park. They are doing green space.
we've been working with them here
Probably going to develop some.
for Blake strategy, and they're doing this
Oh,
deal
okay.
in Kansas City Fire.
Well, actually, I thought one hour dies. Well, I'll be.
Well, yeah, it's like
When do you go?
$800,000.
I'm leaving Sunday.
This Sunday. So you're not back?
I'll be no.
Check
I'll
on
be
that tomorrow.
get back in Tuesday.
Are you on the
Because I was going to suggest we
Probably. Is it get back in?
Charlotte?
Charlotte, yeah. So.
Hi, Peter.
I'm a consultant. It's nice to hear you.
Nice to see you. Good luck.
Thank you.
How are you? Hi, everybody.
No, I'm like,
Okay, you just need expansion of space.
is that there's something I need to do? Should I do that?
Yeah.
It's nice meeting you, John. See you, bro. Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Hey, Linda. Hi, how you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Why?
I was asked. But
Right.
that's about 150 is their gap for the acquisition.
Yeah, I think that's what Brian said we could get.
Yeah. Any of the arrows up, down.
Bob Charles, we need to provide more memory space for Lamont's layout. Only tomorrow morning to make sure this.
You know what's so funny about that? I got a notice on my computer today that says your mailbox is full. Because I save everything. Do you do the same thing?
I'm actually pushing it into a different folder.
Folder,
but
yeah,
still,
that's what I do too.
Because they don't
I
have a,
try to get better at doing things.
No.
You're welcome. Oh,
What did I do? Oh, you're welcome. I wish that I was there. But I figured the least I
have
could
it
do
not.
is.
Oh,
So what are you gonna say, stay at the ballgame?
what?
Are you gonna stay at the ballgame all night?
Could it be Liz?
Getting it started.
Are you gonna change? You're not going in a suit.
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Hi, Mark. I'm well.
Dominic always told me that the symbol in Chinese was
Got a full boat tonight.
two women and one rooster.
They're all here.
It was a picture day.
It is a. It is.
Well, they all look very nice.
Okay, we'd like to start the Economic Development Committee meeting. And at this time would be courtesy of the floor. Anyone from the public? Courtesy of the floor. Anyone from council? Courtesy of the floor. Okay, and then we will let Mark or Tina start us off with our presentation tonight from the Heritage Strategies. Thank you, Mark.
Good
Mr.
evening.
Hardney?
Yes, tonight we're going to hear a presentation on the county's historic and cultural assets plan. We started this process last year, went through a competitive process in partnership with the Planning Commission to select a consultant to help us develop the first ever Northampton County Historic and Cultural Assets Plan. This plan is being funded in part with a Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission grant of $25,000, and then the county is kicking in $50,000 of table games revenue to pay for this. Since we don't have a plan, we thought it was a good idea to try to get a general sense of the historic and cultural assets throughout the county and how we can maximize those for the county. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Peter Benton from Heritage Strategies, who is our consultant leading us through this project. I did give out two handouts to you. One is the PowerPoint presentation, and the other is a list of some community workshops for stakeholders that we're going to be having. You're welcome to join us at those meetings, or if you want to promote that with your constituents, that would be great too. Just one. It's basically the same meeting. We're just giving 4 opportunities for the county residents to provide input.
Same meeting for
Hello, my name is Peter Benton. I'm a principal with Heritage Strategies. We're a small planning firm. I'm based in northern Chester County, so I'm within driving distance, which is unusual for us because we work all over the country. So it's a real pleasure for us to be here and to get to know Northampton County better, and I really appreciate you taking the time to let us be here. I have a presentation which I'll walk through as quickly as I can and try not to be too verbose. I want to just talk a little bit about the work program and some of the issues that we're looking to address with the Historical and Cultural Assets Plan. And this is our team. Tina and Mark from DCED are leading it, along with our friends from the Planning Commission, who are here, three of the 4, who are part of the team, and then my partner Elizabeth and I, and we have another firm that, our firm specializes in planning for historic preservation. I'm an architect and planner. My partner is a community planner, and then our other team specializes in the designation of historic resources, and they also work out of northern Chester County. This is the work program that the schedule that we're working to, and we started back in December, and we've been really getting to know the county. We've been spent quite a bit of time driving around, taking photographs, and reaching out to local and regional stakeholders. We have a task force that's serving as a steering committee for us, made up of mainly organizations from the regional level, from the county level, as well as some of your other county departments. Items 3 and 4, tasks 3 and 4, which I've underlined here, are the most important, and we're just entering into task 3 right now, which is a series of workshops that we're having with stakeholders, primarily leaders, community leaders from the municipal level, as well as a variety of local heritage and historic and economic development participants. And we're going to, as I think we were just alluding to, we have a series of 4 workshops that are going to be occurring later this month and in early May. And the point of this is for us to present our findings and to get feedback and to really try and dig into the issues related to community development and community planning and community character. This is not intended to be an exercise just in dealing with this, the preservation of historic buildings. It's really about community planning, about community identity, and about the role that cultural and historic assets play in community health and economic development.
I'm sorry,
yes.
I'll interrupt you.
Interrupt me at whenever.
So just looking at the stakeholders in the plan, have you guys met, worked, or do you plan on working with the county museum in Easton?
Oh yes. In fact, I was in touch with her today, and they're helping us find some archive records, and she is on our. Carrie is on our. There are 2 actually representatives on our task force, and I visited the site and I visited their sites, and we're continuing discussions with them. So they're key. One of our goals is to talk about heritage tourism as an economic driver. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but I'm just impressed with what the 2 cities have been doing. In that regard.
And just of course, it's great if we can tie some of this stuff to existing, obviously, functions that we fund and support in there, so that they can all benefit and not that they're working together instead of just independently parallel.
That's one of the big things we want to do. One of the things we've been finding in our conversations is a lot of the tourism destinations I feel like they're working in isolation. Mm-hmm. And you have a new director of Lehigh Valley.
Lehigh Valley.
Yeah, and he's a part of our task force too. And so we're looking to sort of take us, I'm not criticizing anything that came before, but we're looking to sort of pull together themes that can help us to drive tourism and visitation, and to use that as a sort of basis for economic health, especially in the boroughs and other places. I'll talk about that a little more, and happy to continue with that. So after this series of workshops we'll have another series of workshops, probably in July, at which we'll be presenting our recommendations for input, again, from the same stakeholders who take an interest in this. And only after that will we actually start putting a draft together with the idea of completing the plan by the end of the year. And we're also working in concert with the county comprehensive plan. We're a little bit ahead of them. And so but we see our document as being a feeder or a closely related to the county comprehensive plan, master plan. And so we just mentioned stakeholders. We have some statewide partners. Mark mentioned PHMC, which is the first one up there, the Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation Office, which is providing with funding. But we have other partners as well, entities that have sites within the region. My partner and I have worked closely with the Delaware and Lehigh National Heritage Corridor. We did their master plans twice, and so there are entities that at the statewide level, and then of course county departments. The regional stakeholders are important because we expect them to be the drivers in implementing the plan. But the real target of this is really the municipal level, both the municipal officials, planning offices at the planning processes at the municipal level, and the local history and heritage organizations and what they do. And then there will also be an educational element as a part of this. Some of that educational element is heritage tourism. In heritage tourism, it's really driven. We're trying to attract visitors to the communities, like we do here in Easton and in Bethlehem and elsewhere. But we're also aiming heritage tourism at residents, because we want them to appreciate the places in which they already live, so they'll take care of the historic and cultural assets that we have. So the municipal level is really the target. I wanted to just give a brief outline of what the plan might look like, and we haven't actually developed an outline for the plan yet, but it'll have some introductory sections. There will be an introduction executive summary that will probably actually summarize the entire plan and be quite extensive and be graphically oriented and to be coordinated with the other types of documents that the Planning Commission puts together, especially with regard to the comprehensive plan. But then we'll have some background chapters that'll have a lot of meat and will be only referenced for detail and implementation. There'll be a chapter on the foundation, the background, the planning, and one of the most important chapters we talk about is historic Northampton County. That is, what is the history of the county, and how do historic resources influence local communities. And then we'll have a chapter on planning approaches, which is really the big idea, the goals, the vision, the approach, and that will set the stage for the implementation chapters, which I think one of them will certainly deal with countywide policy and planning. Planning is extremely important to us. What is the county's role in municipal planning, countywide planning, and in assisting municipalities in their planning? But there are also initiatives that you have, like your current blight study that's being undertaken, that we work hand in hand in, because we're interested in blight and neighborhoods and neighborhood health. There'll be a chapter that deals with economic development and community revitalization. Community revitalization is what community health, economic development is what we're really interested in, because without the economic prosperity, the character of the communities declines. And so that's really sort of a foundation of the plan. But the landscape in general, as you'll see in a couple other slides, the landscape is extremely important to us. So the health of agriculture, not only in terms of land that's preserved and land that is in agriculture, but the health of the agricultural industry as an economic entity within the county is important to us. And landscape conservation and open space is important, not only because they're community assets, but because when you preserve landscapes, you also preserve historic character. How we strengthen the countywide and local preservation programs is an issue for us that we're already digging into. And then, as I mentioned, interpretation, education, and heritage tourism all work together in different ways, reaching different audiences that really talk about why community character is important should be important to everybody. So there are three questions that we're really trying to pose. One is, what are community trends, and what are desired future outcomes? And that's really what the County Comprehensive Plan is addressing. And then, so we're trying to, in the second question, figure out what is the role within that of historic and cultural assets. And then thirdly, what are the tools and strategies and mechanisms by which we can achieve desired outcomes? And I think what's a little bit different from the approach that our firm takes is that we'll take advantage of any tool that's available. And so we're not just focused on sort of the traditional historic preservation tools. We're interested in tools that for instance, the blight approaches that are really not necessarily about historic preservation, but it's about healthy neighborhoods. And so we're supportive of those types of initiatives and any kind of tool that at the regional or local level that will get us a desired outcome of really healthy community character. Whoops, I think I went too far. I wanted to just touch on what we call historic context. This is basically what is the history of the county. And in the parlance of historic preservation, we call it historic contexts. And these historic contexts are overlapping, but they overlap each other. I'm not going to go through this, but I'm going to give some examples in the next few slides of how these historic contexts result in landscape character and landscape change. and how they change over time and what they're related to. And so we will have a chapter that talks about the history and about the types of resources that are related from each of these periods of development. Everything really begins with the natural landscape, the native, what we call the native landscape, and the geology, the landforms, the rivers, and the soils and the plant communities, because really the economic history of the county is related to these natural resources. Whether you're talking about slate, you're talking about cement, those are all natural resources, and as was the river and the canal, and they all resulted in different sort of outcomes for community. Yeah.
What's the color pattern on the last? There's no key codes.
This is a geological map of the county. So what you're looking at in the gray and the yellow are the slate region. I'm sorry. The brown and blue line above that is Blue Mountain, and then down below that you see some blues and grays. That's the limestone region, and below that is the Redding Prong. That's the green area, and so this is geology.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I should have.
Where's this map from?
This is a state geological map. It was produced back in the early '80s.
Oh, so if we go to some geological website, we get to see that.
You know, I don't know where. Yes, you can download it probably. I scanned this for my own copy, which is why you see the wrinkles. It's not available anymore easily. And it's the maps I've seen that I've been able to find online are much less detailed, and it's the detail that really gets interesting because what strikes me about the county is really the topography is really quite more complicated than you would think.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, especially up in the shale area or the slate area. It's the mountainousness of it, the rolling topography took me by surprise because I'm familiar with working down in the Cumberland Valley. It's all the same valley, but down there it's much more level. And you still get the same difference between the limestone area and the slate area, but most of your limestone area is now suburbs. And but this, I would say, I think it's that the dark blue area. The first blue area, as you work your way down, is your cement, your cement resources.
We could see where our now defunct big cement industry we used to have in Lehigh Valley.
Yeah.
You can run the line from Northampton all the way
Right down into Bath and
and
through.
see where
Right.
they
Whitehall.
were.
They're all there, and you
you.
can still see there. In fact, I've got some slides of it in a moment. So
Okay.
sorry to
All right.
identify.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
thank you
that's
for the.
So I want to give you just a sense of how we think about how we're thinking about historic and cultural assets, and it's really from a landscape perspective. And so these two images, the one on the right is a map from 1874, and the one on the left is an aerial photograph from 1937. And this really gives evidence of what we call the agricultural landscape that really existed from the time of your early settlement, reaches its peak period of development about 1850, just before the Civil War, and then continues really up to the present in some ways. The striking thing about these two images is they're the same place. The map is slightly turned, but you can see if you look at the V that the river makes, there's very little change in the landscape over this long period. It's 100 years, 150 years. What's important about this period is that the landscape was completely wiped clear of trees, except for along some of the rivers where the mills were, and it was all agriculture. And it was all dependent upon wagon transport and water power. And the mills ran by water power. Anything you wanted to move from place to place had to be done by wagons. So it's a very diffuse landscape, and a very sort of the patterns of the landscape become typical everywhere. And so when you drive around Northampton County, you see this everywhere. And one of the in addition to the mill site, the farms themselves, of course, and the mill sites along the rivers, but you also get these crossroad communities, these little crossroad villages. They're everywhere across the county, and they really are a striking feature. And we see that, so one of the resources we identify is the crossroad villages. And they exist now in different degrees of what we call integrity. That is, how much of the historic fabric has been lost. But they still provide a community function, is that there's still places where people go to get services. It used to be blacksmiths, but now it's gas stations in Turkey Hill. And so how do you, and some of them have adapted well and retained their character and retained their names, and some of them have been almost completely wiped off. And so it's interesting to see the patterns that change. So the question that we would ask is that in the comprehensive plan, how do we continue to use these crossroad villages as important community centers, if you will, but then retain their historic character and identity, but still allow them to change to modern uses that are clearly needed. Now, so the point of these two images is to show how similar the landscape is over this period of time. Now, this set of slides is the same photograph on the left. This is southwestern Bushkill Township. And then this is on the right is the image today from Google Earth. And the striking difference that you see in those images is the amount of encroachment of suburban development into that landscape, which is one of your most rural townships. And also the consolidation of farm fields, which says something about changes in the farming industry. And so those are patterns that we're looking at. And these patterns are just going to continue. You're going to continue to lose agricultural land, as you have been. And if we're thinking in decades, 2 or 3 decades down the line, we're going to be almost built out. And so the question we would pose with regard to the comprehensive plan is that what will the landscape look like when we're almost built out? And if you look over in New Jersey, you'll see what that looks like in Somerset County and counties to the east. And so the comprehensive plan needs to be thinking now about that, and our role is to talk about sort of the historic landscape and tools that can preserve character and with regard to it. Now, these images have to do with what we call the railroad area and the coal area. On the right-hand side is a map, again from the 1874 atlas of what is now the Northampton, showing the coal area, which is really the canal era. And on the left is the aerial photograph from 1937. And if you get a chance to look at this in detail, what you'll notice is the growth. That is, the railroads drove tremendous growth, but that growth was not in those agricultural areas that we're just looking at. It was really in the boroughs. And it's in the cities, in the 2 cities, but it's also in all the boroughs. All the boroughs come from this period, Northampton, Bangor, Penn Argyll. They all come from this era because before that, there was no way to get that slate out. There was no way to get the cement out. It was when the railroads came in, and really didn't happen until the late 19th century. And then there was tremendous change that occurred. And this really just is an example, sort of documents that change, the difference between those 2 maps and how big the residential areas are that you see on the left compared to on the right, as well as the industrial outputs. Now, this is the same photograph again with a contemporary photograph on the right from Google Earth. And what's striking about this is how little has actually changed. So you'll see in the Google photograph, you'll see some additional residential areas around the fringes. You'll see some additional industry in the industrial zones. And if you look up on the upper hand right of the Google image, you'll see that one of the cement quarries there has been filled in with water, no longer being used. And so those are, again, changes in the landscape. But the striking thing about this is how little the boroughs have changed, that they really do retain their integrity as community, as individual communities. And then finally, I just want to show a similar image of Bangor. The map on the right, again from 1874, is deceptive because it's a much larger scale than the photograph on the left. And what it shows in that is just the point I just made about the importance of the railroads. That 1874 Bangor was tiny, and they were mining slate, but they couldn't get it out. And it wasn't until the railroads came in, which came in just after this in a big way, that the community boomed, and is essentially what it is today. So if you look at this image again, the Google image on the right, the same point with Northampton is that the size of Bangor has not changed dramatically. It's just additional residential around the fringes, some changes in industry and so on, but it essentially retains its integrity as a community. So I just wanted to sort of give you a sense of how we're looking at this, not just as individual historic resources, but as communities, landscapes, economics, and what are the drivers, and what do we want to have in the future. And the final point I want to make in this has to do with suburbanization. And so this, in this pair of drawings, the one on the left is the 1874 atlas, and the one on the right is a current street map of Hanover Township. And what happens when we fill in with suburbanization is basically the farm fields get filled in, which is obvious to everybody. And the streets that were historic streets become the interconnections, the connector roads that are still, and then you layer on top of that are highways and roundabouts and byways around obstacles and things like that. My point is that even in today's map of Hanover Township, the original layout of the historic agricultural landscape is still there, and some of the resources are still there, and people still identify them by, not only by the roads, by the buildings and resources that are there. So suburbanization has an impact, but it's just another layer. We're talking about layer upon layer upon layer of historic impact. So these are some of our initial observations. First of all, there's really great what we call integrity overall county-wide. Integrity has to do with the character of the historic buildings and landscapes that remain. There's a high degree of integrity, and that's why I'm saying that Bangor and Northampton retain integrity, because they really haven't changed all that much. There's a clear division of the landscape into urban, suburban, and rural landscape types, and they then each have their own types of issues that the local communities are addressing. The urban cores, meaning primarily Bethlehem and Easton, have great character, and over the decades, there's been really good planning going on. We're really pleased with they're using the best tools, and I may be rosy-eyed when I learn more. People. And the problem is that I come from the outside, and what you're seeing is our impression from what we've seen. People who are inside of it, who are dealing with the day-to-day frustrations of trying to get things done, are just frustrated with how long it takes to get things done. But what we see in comparison to other communities is that your two major cities are, I think, really doing a great job. Slightly different approaches into their planning and their economic strategies, which you would expect. But I'm very impressed with the basic approaches that they're taking. Then the number of boroughs that you have, ritually small urban areas, is unusual. For say comparison to the Cumberland Valley, which is the other end of the Great Valley, because of the slate industry and the cement industry, you have these small urban gems that have been developed here, and it's unusual because other places don't have that as many as you have. So we see those as an asset. And so what are they going to be in the future? And we would also say that they have high integrity, and we have not seen what we would call blight. We see, so obviously some areas are more affluent than others, but when we go to all of your boroughs, we're finding that people are taking care of their residences. The residences are occupied. Most of them are covered with their houses with vinyl, but so be it. They're taking care of them, and they're still there, and they're still active. And so we have a very positive feeling about the boroughs, and so what we would propose in the future, that they continue to be centers of residential neighborhoods and of commercial activity. And so what clearly we would be looking to do is take Main Street approaches to making those commercial areas as vital as possible. And you already have some Main Street programs. They're really trying to crank those up and make the boroughs the center of the community, of the larger regions and that they're within. Then the final one there is, I mentioned already the Crossroad Villages, so I won't repeat myself there. But we think, yeah.
I'm sorry, on the
Yeah.
Crossroad Villages, just before we move on, I know if you go north of Bath on 248, there's Janesville, and those little signs. Now, some of them are still around. They littered the county because, as you said, like Crossroads, assignment for Crossroads. Is that part of your goal or mission? Is to try and help? Some have been torn down, but preserve those and actually make them part of.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we would love signs that are existing that basically are historic. We would like to see stay, but then we would like to see every community sort of reclaim its identity, because if you look on the maps, all those names are still there, and so then, but it all has to do with really the people who are living there. You know, we're not going to impose anything on them, but we want them to step up and want to sort of enhance their community. I would go out on a limb and say that every crossroad community ought to have a master plan. You know, it can be doesn't have to be a large, complex thing. It could be a plan on a page, but it should have an idea of how we're going to grow. When you look at these things, they started with some historic buildings right at the crossroads. You know, probably dating to the late 1700s, and then they grow out, and so you can just sort of look at history in terms of the buildings that are there. But you get buildings from the late 19th century, buildings from the early 20th century, right up to the present. You know, little ranch houses. And you can just drive along the street and see the progression of historic styles, if you will.
One more comment.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to put it on Google Maps, I guess, the historic.
Well, let me actually, Google Maps is important because every community needs to claim its domain, and so that's a tool. So that's the kind of thing that, it's not a normal tool, but you need to claim that domain. So when somebody's looking at Google Maps, there's a button there. You push the button and stuff comes up. Photographs come up. Retail people come up. Stuff. And then there are large areas of rural agricultural landscape remaining, but I am a little concerned about the agricultural industry. I'm not sure. Of course, it's winter. But I'm not sure how healthy it is, but that's something that we're going to be looking into, the future of agriculture. You can't just save agricultural land. If you don't save the agricultural industry, you're not going to look so good in a couple decades. And the whole movement toward local foods, and not just wineries and things like that, but local foods, supplying restaurants, farmers markets, and so on, is a way. There's a whole new generation that's entering into agriculture, and they're sort of the land, and they're not just growing corn and soybeans. They're growing other things, and they're selling them locally. So that's something that we would
Will
want
you
to
dovetail into our Penn State extension then with that and all?
Yeah, I don't know how yet, but we need to find out.
Okay, because they're doing a lot of that.
We will.
Stuff, I think.
Yeah, that would be, so that's how we would work with sort of the DCED and the planning department, is how do we do that? How do we support the industry of agriculture?
Right.
And so that's another example of, it's not just about historic preservation, it's about sort of strategies that will preserve landscapes and make landscapes useful for the future. The second point up there, lots of people, lots of cars, I was impressed with how busy you are. I can't drive around without getting in a traffic jam. Or, I'm driving around trying to take photographs. I can't stop because there are too many cars. That's a good thing. And I even see it in the boroughs. People walking around, lots of activity. So I'm just not seeing what I would call blight and decline. And the continued suburbanization, moving northward, moving east and west from 33, that's what I think I have a slide later on that says you're experiencing as much change now as you ever have. And so we need to think now about the future, about what we want the county to look like 2-3 decades out, because if we don't address those things like conservation and agriculture now and community health, it'll be too late. the general treatment of historic buildings, that, there isn't always, and people don't always appreciate what they have. And so you see changes to historic buildings that wouldn't be the kinds of changes I would recommend. But there's an educational component if that's the part of the sort of heritage tourism part, to get people to appreciate their character of their community and why it's special, and then give them the information they need to treat their actual buildings and landscapes in a way that preserves their character rather than detracts from it. And then finally, planning and zoning mechanisms throughout the municipalities do not include tools that are available with regard to historic resources. The townships, in particular, seem to be, many of them are very sophisticated in their zoning and regulatory and processes. But there are a whole range of tools that they're not using specifically related to historic resources that, again, I think through the planning commission, we can begin to make available through them through best practices and sort of smart growth and sort of educational and incentives. So I don't know how my time's going, but so 10 minutes? Right. So this is actually what I wanted to get to. The key questions and points that I want sort of to hear from you about. One is, what is the role of and the contribution of historic assets? And we would say it's community identity, its sense of place, its quality of life, and to the extent possible, it's economic. And this is for you, what is the county's role? And we would say it's about vision, leadership, best practices, and incentives to the municipal level, to the private sector. The continued economic prosperity is essential to everything. If we're not prosperous, we can't take care of what we've got. And then the point I mentioned earlier about the pace of change, it's as intense now as ever. And what we do now will have a lasting impact, and we need to think in terms of decades. What policies, tools, and best practices will work? And that's where we really need to, a lot of it's not going to happen at the county level. Most of it's going to happen in the private sector and at the municipal level. So how do we influence that in the way that we want to see those forces of change create the kind of communities that we want to have in the future? And then finally, the need to incorporate thinking about historic assets into the full range of county, municipal, and private sector activities. That's sort of the whole toolbox. Trying to think about whether it's Google or the Blight Plan or different economic drivers. How do we? What we're really after is strong community character, strong community identity, and we're impressed with what we see. And our role is to, work with our partners and try and figure out strategies for the future that will work over the long term. That's really it. I would love to have your thoughts on this. Our next steps, we have these stakeholder workshops. We're currently doing outreach and interviews with mainly stakeholders at the county-wide level in a variety of different domains. Continued research and continued field review, and then the key points of contact are Mark for DCED and John for the Planning Commission and myself for the consultant team. Any questions or anything that you would like to?
What's the cover photo?
Penn Argyle back in about. Hold on. Penn Argyle. I don't know.
Go ahead now.
You have a whole variety of these bird's eyes that were done back in the 1870s, and they're available through the Library of Congress. And so this is an image of. You pronounce it, Penn Argyle.
That's the resident. He's sitting right there.
All right.
That's
Penn Argyle. So
Penn Argyle.
Yeah. So I was going to give you that suggestion before the April 23rd meeting workshop.
I have to practice it. I have to practice Argyle. I have to practice it. But this, there are other communities that have bird's eyes too. This one I picked out because it wasn't Bethlehem. because Bethlehem is the most.
Uh-huh.
I just had a question.
Sure.
So are the communities that you're going to focus on the ones that you've listed here, like no others?
No, no, no.
Oh, okay. 'Cause I was
No.
going to say Freemansburg's historic.
Oh, yeah,
and,
Freeman, I know, no,
It's not
yeah.
in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we're looking at we've got a list of all the municipalities. We're not,
Oh, so you're not hyper-focused on just a few?
no. We're looking countywide, but you know what? Our message always is, where's the energy? Which communities are ready to move and act in what domains? And then our job is through the planning activities is to feed them with information and resources and incentives, but have the action be driven from the community itself. And so, there might be a borough that's really well organized and has driving community leadership. And so you give them the tools that they need, and they, generates from within, and they begin to blossom, and then other communities see what happens. So that's really what the comprehensive plan we would see it being about. But everybody's in play. I don't know which list you were looking at in terms of communities, but
Just a slide.
not just slides. I was just trying to pick out examples that were evident, that were good examples of the points I wanted to make.
There's a book written by a Nazareth historian some years ago called Place Names of Northampton County. It'll help you with all those little towns like Aluda.
That would be nice.
Jim Wright, remember? Well, you'd probably know. He was a teacher.
That 1874 map has all the place names right on it, and some of them are still current. I mean, still being used today when you look at the maps.
And will you be tapping the resources of the universities around here? Because there's some really great historians.
Yeah, and we would be interested in their involvement. Sometimes and so, Lehigh and
yeah, because Ned Heindel
Lafayette
Lehigh is a huge historian.
And they will. Moravian, we
they
did
have all the archives, the Moravian archives. Oh,
right. So we're interested. We've been talking to different Moravian groups, and I actually worked on the preservation plan for Moravian College, so I'm pretty intimately familiar with the college itself. And so that what a tremendous resource. I mean, and they are they've made an application to be a World Heritage Site. I think back in 2007 or 2008, and they were given sort of the associate level. I forget what the exact name is, and so I'm interested in that because what better thing to market in terms of tourism than the Moravian story? And it's not just a story about the 18th century; it comes right up today. So in my conversations earlier this week with Susan at the Moravian Historical Society in Nazareth, my question was, well, how many churches are there active? And she said 15. So, including both Northampton and parts of Lehigh counties. And so really it's still an active community, which is obviously evident in Bethlehem itself because of everything that they do in Bethlehem. But and seminary. Yeah. So nobody has that. And so that's one of the unique assets that you have. And you already market at the music festivals.
Number one in the country, right?
Yeah.
Just a comment. The Lehigh Valley Planning Commission is here. Some of the folks from the Planning Commission, and I'd just like to. You said back when you were presenting, you said, you were really impressed with the activity in the Lehigh Valley, and that the people are moving around and things are happening, and I just want to say, they have a lot to do with that, and also Mark Hartney and Tina Smith, because they've been these communities now, what they're working on now, and I don't want to step on their thunder, but they're getting them together because you said they're missing some of the things that they can be doing, so they're trying to combine some of these communities, encouraging them to get together so they can come up with and have all these plans that they're supposed to have in place so that they can get the granting and the funding and be up to compliance. So they're working pretty hard on that. So just a shout out to everyone.
We were pleased to learn that they were doing community, regional comprehensive plans rather than every individual has its own comprehensive plan.
That's
so now they're working on the Nazareth one, and we want to get right in on that one and try and be a part of that one right now because it's happening. And so that regional approach is the role that the county can play. Is to, create the regional approach where communities aren't fighting with each other because they're next to each other, but they're actually cooperating together.
And also, where was your last study done? What region or what area? The group that you work with, or?
Well, we work. I just finished 2 plans up in Massachusetts, one in the Berkshires and one in outside of Boston. We're working on a combination historic preservation plan, open space plan, and agricultural plan for Somerset County, which is why I refer to Somerset County as being sort of a level of density that's going to be here. We're working out in Jefferson City, Missouri right now. This is this capital of Missouri on a preservation plan for them. But our real bread and butter has always been National Heritage Areas. That's why we were working with DNL. What we did that's a little different is that we took the approach to a National Heritage Area and applying it to community planning. And a lot of our plans are at the municipal level. It's nice to be working again at the county level, which we are doing in Somerset County and here.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Or I just appreciate your taking the time to hear us. And we'll be back, I hope.
All right.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. Okay. Does anybody, Mark, Gina? No? Anyone else have anything else for community economic development? Economic Development Committee meeting is adjourned. Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
It was. I wonder if this.
Pretty interesting.
Turn my mic. Oh.